All right. Look at that. Head's in the camera.
Yay.
Feet are almost in the cameras. I think this is a pretty good setup. All right, you're on.
Okay, yay. So, today we are going to talk about competition nutrition stuffs. And we posted on our Facebook page, which I'll link to like somewhere over here, like in this nebulous area between Jason and I, asking for specific questions from you guys. And so we're going to answer some of those and also kind of use those to basically talk about a couple of key points that we think are important when it comes to competition day nutrition. Yeah?
Yeah.
All right? Okay.
Yeah, we are. So let's, I guess, we'll start from the beginning with kind of laying out what we would suggest is the typical plan for the typical competitor who is actually concerned about making weight. You know, they're very close to the top end of their weight division, and so they're going to do a night before weigh-in to make sure that they can, you know, diet down if necessary, and then weigh in, and then have the largest window possible to kind of recover from that process before the competition the next morning. It's fairly common that promoters offer this service.
Yeah. I don't think I've seen a show that doesn't have night before weigh-ins.
Yeah, I've done 5 in the last 2 years, and they all had that offered. So
yeah, I've done like 7 or 8.
Yeah.
All of them, so.
Yeah. So pretty common. So hopefully you'll be able to utilize that. This is not really all that interesting to super heavyweights or people who are like way lighter than their division requires. But all right, it is the day before. And you're, you know, a few pounds over or whatever, and you're doing everything like you can last minute to kind of get there. What that usually entails is dehydration more than anything else, right?
Right.
Yeah.
No water.
It's usually possible for athletes to lose maybe about 3% of their body mass just by sort of getting dehydrated in a day or two before stepping on the scale. For a competitor who's 140 pounds, that might be like 5 pounds. For someone who's 180, that's more like, actually that'd be 5.4, right? So
yeah.
4.2, I guess. 4 pounds for the light weights, 5.5 for the middle weights. So you can walk around a little over heavy, you know, by 4 or 5 pounds and probably just pee that out in a day or two and it'll be fine. So the day before, yeah, you should be able to. The day before, basically, the moment you step off the scale, that's competition time, right? So, or at least we've decided that's how we're handling it.
Yeah.
So you step off the scale, and you've now got, let's say it's 5 p.m. You've now got maybe 15 to 20 hours before like the rules meeting or something like that the following morning. Hopefully, you know, your weigh-in includes your, you know, registration, mass card, blah blah. So everything's set to go, and you know you can show up the next morning at 9 or 10 to the rules meeting. So in between 5 p.m. and 9 a.m. is mostly time to eat.
Rehydrate.
If you've been starving yourself and dehydrating yourself, probably have to be very careful about how you initially start to reintroduce food, because you don't want to go too hard too fast, right? So.
And I would say too, like another important thing that we had talked about before, I think we mentioned this in another video before, if you're a novice and it's your first competition, or you just simply don't want to, you do not have to cut weight. It is not necessarily a fun process, and it's certainly not as miserable as it can, as some people make it seem, I suppose. So if you're like, I usually sit about like 3 to 5 pounds over, and I can make weight without sort of dying or killing myself in the process. But I'm also a smaller, leaner female, so I have a lot less that I can cut than somebody like who is Jason's size versus somebody who is much bigger than he is, who carries more body fat.
I'm a lot leaner than Gabby.
Well, yeah.
So I don't really know what she's talking about, but
Same total mass.
Pedialyte.
Pedialyte, it's my favorite.
All right, so basically, if you've lost 3% of your body mass, and it's really just from urine, you can do the math and figure out a liter of water weighs a kilo.
Yep.
Right? So if you lost 4 pounds, you've probably pissed away 2 liters of fluid. and you need to replace that, and you probably can't replace it all in one sitting. That's probably gonna cause some distress. Might make your stomach feel kind of waterlogged or make you sick to your stomach. Especially if you're gonna use a product that has added minerals like Pedialyte, and it can be a little hard on your stomach to chug a ton of it. So you probably want to do something like 1 liter per hour or something like that?
Yeah, that's usually what I do. The minute I step off the scale, I just start sipping it. The temptation is always kind of to drink a lot really fast because you're really thirsty because you haven't had anything, assuming up until that point. But definitely resist that temptation and just kind of sip it. And I usually do like a liter within an hour, and then I kind of taper off after that. But like Jason said, you don't want to pound a liter of fluid because you're gonna puke everywhere. And it's going to not feel good and kind of defeat the purpose of rehydrating.
Well, the other major thing you've done to yourself, if you've been eating less to lose weight, and this is more true, I guess, the longer you've been doing it, is there's a good chance that you've depleted your glycogen storage, and all that is really just glucose that's been bound together in more complex molecules that's stored inside your muscles. It has its own weight, and its movement through your body is mediated by fluids. So when you drop glycogen, you don't need as much fluid either. So you can lose a lot of weight basically by like starving yourself of carbohydrates for days. The problem is it'll cripple your glycolytic performance. So anything that's like hard for 10 to 30 seconds or a little more is really going to be devastated by a big reduction of glycogen, which is basically almost every single event in a strongman competition.
Yeah.
So replenishing your glycogen storage, even if it's not so low, even if you're not like dieting and you're just fucking with your water a little bit, is probably really important. You can start doing that immediately, I guess, with things that are really easily digestible that have a lot of simple sugar in them. Particularly glucose, sucrose, and maltose, which are basically disaccharides. They're about as simple as real foods come. So Pedialyte has that in it, so win-win.
I like the little sweet potato applesauce baby food pouches. So it seems weird to like recommend all of this baby food stuff, but it actually is really useful because it's almost pretty much pre-digested.
Turns out babies go hard.
They do. They go really hard. And it's all sort of like simple food. There's not any weird, crazy like sugar alcohols or anything in it that would upset your stomach if you haven't been eating that for a while. So baby foods, eat them. They come in little pouches. They travel well. And Pedialyte is our recommendation.
Yeah. There's honestly certain candies that are made the old-fashioned way. But they're basically just sucrose or glucose or variations on that theme. Like you'll see people hitting like gummy bears and jelly beans and that. Read the labels, but a lot of those are just made with table sugar, which is half glucose and half sucrose. And, works pretty effectively. There's a limit probably to how hard you want to do that. And it would be, again, I think, dependent on how starved you are and what your size is. But that's probably just a snack. That's what you're eating and drinking on your way out of weigh-ins. You take an hour or two to do that to kind of maybe more fully rehydrate and put a little something in your stomach so that you're kind of getting back to normal when you don't get sick. And then 7 or 8 p.m., that process is over and you still got a few hours before bedtime. That's dinner time. Yeah. And that's where you're really going to pig out, right?
Yeah, you're going to go hard. You're going to go really hard.
We were kind of thinking about the math, and someone Gabby's size who competes as a lightweight, might be able to store 200 to 300 grams of glycogen in all of her muscles. Someone I could be 200, like it might be like 300 to 400. It's not a ton, but still, 300 grams of carbohydrates in one sitting is 1,200 calories. You're going to have to think very concertedly about how many bowls of rice
do you want to eat?
Yeah, how many large baked potatoes, how many servings of pasta or macaroni and cheese or what have you, of big starchy complex carbohydrates will it take to get there? And that's actually going to be a pretty serious meal. And I think there it's important that you're familiar with the food you know how it affects your body, you know it's something that you enjoy and that you have a good appetite for, but won't upset your stomach in any way.
Yeah, and I like personally after I cut weight, it's hard for me to eat a lot in one sitting. So I will.
2 small dinners.
Yeah, I do I just kind of eat for hours continuously.
It was never my intention, but I completely sort of organically came about the same thing where it's, we'll have, I'll drink sweet tea a lot when I'm leaving the weigh-ins, and I honestly we'll go and get fast food that we like to eat a lot, basically Five Guys or Chick-fil-A. I will get a small meal from one of those places, and it'll be small, will be 1,000, 1,500 calories, and I'll eat that right away at 5 p.m. And then we'll have a real dinner at 8 p.m. where I'll eat another 1,000 to 2,000 calories. And by that point, it's just real whole food, and I'm eating a lot, I'm drinking water, and I'm pretty fucking stuffed when I go to bed.
Yeah.
And my ritual has become to also have a big breakfast of real foods, as early as possible in the morning, 6 or 7 a.m. And I again, starchy, sugary stuff. So I'll go to some shitty diner and get French toast or pancakes, because I know I'll be okay with that. And honestly, that will sustain me until noon. Between nerves and being really full from a huge dinner and a big breakfast, I don't really necessarily have a desire to eat. Coupled with maybe pre-workout, it's I don't.
Caffeine.
Yeah, I'll get through the first 2 or 3 events before I think about, what am I going to snack on now?
Yeah, and I'm usually the same way. I will usually after weigh-ins, I like salty things, so I have pretzels, and I have some peanut butter cups, and then I'll eat a dinner. Depending on where I'm at, if I know that there are restaurants nearby, it's a major city, I can usually find something to eat. I have dietary restrictions, so I make things complicated. So if that's the case of where I'm not sure where I'm going to be able to eat, I'll just bring food with me. I'll make pasta the night before and bring it with me and sit in my hotel room and house pasta. But it's usually I just eat until I've gained almost all of my weight back, and you can weigh yourself and see this. And then in the morning, I am not really a big breakfast person, and I usually train, I'm usually here in the gym at 5:30 to 6, so I'm used to not eating before I work out, so I tend to be pretty okay with having something smaller. I usually do gluten-free oatmeal, a protein shake, or potatoes and eggs at a diner or something like that, and then it really is not until the second event or so that I'm even thinking about food because of all the C4 and coffee that I've had previously.
Yeah, that's going to be my next subject. So it's morning of. I think your choice to eat a lot morning of is very individually specific.
Yeah.
Some folks, between being nervous about maybe their first show or any show, really don't have a lot of appetite. And that might be something that you have to overcome because intellectually you know that I have to have some food even if I don't want it. On the flip side, there's folks that they don't perform well unless they ate a lot.
Yeah.
I find that the former is a lot more common than the latter. And I've also found that your instinct is to want to go all 2 scoops because it's competition day.
Don't go 2 scoops.
But what I've found is you're amped up enough as it is. It's especially for that very first event. Nerves are running really high, and you probably will be surprised at how little extra help you need to get amped up. And to be honest, getting jittery from caffeine in conjunction with being weak, dizzy, shaky, freaked out because you're nervous is a bad combination.
Yeah.
Also, I found that a lot of pre-workouts kind of do cause some gastrointestinal distress.
Yeah, especially if you haven't really eaten a lot that morning. So what I usually do for my pre-workout is I usually have not had any at all the week before weigh-ins because I cut out, I'm really not training that much anyways, and I also cut out creatine when I'm trying to make weight. So in the morning I will essentially just fill up a bottle of water with maybe 2 scoops of C4, some creatine, and I'll sip on that all day just consistently and kind of keep myself at a steady baseline versus trying to slam 2 scoops and then go do an event because it would make me way too jittery. And coupled with there's something like heat, I'm going to black out and not feel very good.
So leading into the first contest or the first event, morning of the contest, I think is very individually specific. Most folks don't tolerate a ton of food, period, before like an intense exercise or before a nervous situation. So that's why the night before is probably so important. Or maybe even, I think for me, you know, eating a large breakfast early is distant enough to where the nerves haven't really kicked in as much yet. But to be honest, like, I don't eat a ton, and I only eat like comfort foods anyways. So when you get to that first event, you know, if you've done the things before, the night before correctly, you're not needing food, you're not needing water so bad, so you can really do whatever you want. The difference is I think when the day wears on, or when you get, typically the first or second events will, you know, be 1 rep max oriented, or they'll be clean and press. Yeah, they'll be clean and press related or deadlift related, and those are usually put front because they're the most skill or sort of the highest intensity. And then after that, you start to see the moving events and stuff. And there can be moving events like a truck pull or a hand over hand pull or a sled drag, or even maybe to a lesser extent like a sled or a farmer's walk, something like that. Those can actually be taxing on your glycolytic system and even your glycogen reserve. So you can find that maybe doing 2 of those in a row, like maybe one of those first events is for reps, and then right after that you've got like a sled drag, you're gonna actually probably benefit from eating some food. At that point, again, the biggest concern you probably have is really just blood sugar levels and sort of and glycogen balance. So, you know, there's such thing as fat and protein, but they really don't fucking matter all that much on competition day. Really what you want is what we said before about post weigh-in stuff. Like, you want easily digestible, simple carbohydrates that will digest relatively rapidly. And that we could go back to the Pedialyte stuff, the baby food, applesauce, apple juice, which I'm trying to make a thing.
Thing now.
And you know, and even stuff that borders on like the the candy stuff.
Yeah,
you know?
I like candy when I can be.
Reese's peanut butter cups.
Cookies.
Those things are obviously going to have a lot more fat, and they're going to be a lot more slower digesting. That can be a plus and a minus. If you need, like, if you just did a truck pull and it went to the timer, like you don't want fat out of it. You just want pure sugar stuff.
Yeah.
But if you're just trying to snack, 100 calories here, 100 calories there throughout the day to make sure that you don't suddenly just sort of bonk out, the candy stuff's probably fine. Especially if you're nervous, you're not going to have a lot of appetite. So things that you just love to eat, period, probably good to have around, just to make sure you eat it.
And I usually bring like a variety of foods. I always bring peanut butter cups. That's like, I guess it's like my signature food. It's kind of a weird thing to say. I always have pretzels because I like salt a lot, and I know that I can grab a handful and just kind of be okay with that. I usually bring something else that is slightly more real food-esque, like beef jerky. And I usually won't eat that necessarily between events unless I have a really long time, but I will eat that while I'm waiting for awards or something like that. And baby foods, powdered Gatorade. I'll usually bring protein powder and maybe have like 1 protein shake in the day, maybe. And like some sort of carb powder. If I want that, but having like a variety of things that you like and that you test is really important too.
Once you've like successfully weighed in and you like picked out the night before, your actual needs for food aren't huge, but things that you'll see very common, like Gabby said, comfort foods that you'll eat, and then something like somewhere between just straight water and water plus. And water plus could be like Gatorade or Pedialyte. It could be something that athletes mix up themselves with like various types of sugars, electrolytes, BCAAs, maybe vitamins, and those things are, I wouldn't say necessary, but helpful and pretty typical. And like it's a good thing to experiment with. The important part is none of this should be new on contest day. Like, you shouldn't be eating anything you haven't eaten before, right before you're going to go out and try to max out your deadlift.
Yeah. If it's your first contest and you're not really sure what you want to eat, bring some stuff to eat like while you're training one day, like doing something. That is really the only way to test, because you may think that like, oh, this will be fine, and then you train with it and it is totally not fine. You don't want that on competition day. So absolutely nothing.
Yeah, that's a great way to just experiment. Bring them in and check them out. All right, so that's the general gist of shit. shit.
Yes.
The gist of shit. I'm just checking the cheat sheet over here. We had some awesome questions today on Facebook and a couple other things that Gabby's received over time. So let's talk specifics. We had a question about, this is a colorful one. It's easy to remember. One of our readers asked about, not throwing up during the deadlift. Basically, she implied that, feeling full made her want to puke. And I would say that's a pretty common sentiment.
Yeah, especially if you're belted and doing something where you're highly pressurized.
Yeah.
You don't want to feel that.
So deadlifts, yoke.
Maybe sometimes like a max log.
Stones.
So
what I would suggest is if you have the luxury of the night before weigh-in, like you should concentrate as much of your eating for that 48-hour period between like weigh-in and like medals in that dinner window the night before. Get as much food as you can and then like eat lightly through the morning. I have to admit, I think that my best workouts are on an empty stomach. I feel more energetic and more aggressive when I'm not worried about like food sloshing around my stomach. And physiologically, there's a performance component there. You need blood to digest food. You also need blood to bring oxygen and metabolites to and from your muscles. And you can't do both at the same time. So if you've got a lot of food sitting in your stomach, it's going to negatively impact your ability to do something that's like constant work related, like a sled drag or a medley. And it's going to feel very uncomfortable. And then for max event, like Gabby said, Valsalva maneuver plus belt plus full stomach equals throwing up.
Yeah.
So if you can get away with really loading up the night before and then eating pretty lightly contest day up, I think most people are going to feel the most comfortable that way.
Yes.
And there might be some trouble spots that you particularly avoid, like I'm going to do a frame deadlift for reps. It's like, well, you don't eat before that, right? Maybe a max or a really heavy yoke. Don't eat before that. Maybe stones are like that for you. Don't eat for that.
There is definitely some merit to also not eating before an event because it's going to make you feel sick.
Yeah.
And that's super distracting. Like Jason said, there's definitely a performance component there. So basically try it out, see if it works. We had a question about packing foods versus food provided at meets. Number one, they provide you with snacks. That has never happened in my life ever.
Well, hey, no, that doesn't count. They had cupcakes in North Carolina, but that was like during weigh-ins.
Yeah.
And I've never felt so disgusted by what was obviously a very delicious pastry.
Because it looked so good.
And all I wanted was Pedialyte.
Yeah, so we would always recommend kind of bringing your own stuff because it's your tried and true and tested stuff. And you don't want to be stuck in a situation where there's no food, and don't think that there's going to be food that you can easily procure near the event because most of the times there is not. So bring your stuff.
And all of those things would be surprises, So even if a promoter would have the forethought or generosity to be like, hey, here's a sub, like, what if you throw up every time you eat subs? Like, it's not helpful. So you definitely gotta bring your own stuff.
Yeah.
All right.
Definitely stuff for that. Hydration questions that we had as well. I'm remembering all the really colorful questions as Jason's calling them. So, how to properly hydrate sort of enough to feel good and be hydrated, but not so much that you piss yourself. So this is a pretty female-specific thing. Girls pee when they do heavy stuff. It's called stress urinary incontinence. It is not necessarily a hydration-related thing, first and foremost. It is usually a more physical thing that you should talk to like a physical therapist about. Usually some breakdown in the chain when it comes to stability mostly in the core area for women. But what you want to do is make sure that you pee beforehand, kind of as close as you can to before the event goes, to where you're not late. And depending on the show, you may have the luxury of having 70 bathrooms, like if you're at an arena, or you have 2. So you need to sort of plan accordingly and scope that out. And then there's also the option of just wear your panty liner and black pants. Those will be your best friends. Bring a change of clothes, all that stuff. If you know that that happens, usually for women that's going to be on a deadlift event, car deadlift for reps. Occasionally like a heavy log clean and press because you're smacking yourself in the bladder with something heavy. Stone for reps or heavy stone, I've seen that as well. Again, you're kind of smacking yourself in the bladder with like a 200-pound rock. Something's going to happen. So if that happens to you, be prepared. And so just hydrate enough to feel good, but not too close to the event that you are distracted by the fact that your bladder is full and you have to pee.
So, practical advice. Let's use Gabby as an example. She can beat some 140 pounds, and she walks around at 145. She cuts 5 pounds, or like 2.4 kilos to make weight, right? So we can reasonably assume that she's pissed away 2.5 liters of fluid, right? So she must consume at least 2.5 liters of fluid to restore that balance. And there's 2 or 3 ways that we can assure that we're doing this. Number one, we can measure the volume of fluid. So she can take 3 bottles of Pedialyte and drink 2.5 of them, and we know we're getting there. The other thing that we can use is urine color, right? Like the darker your urine is, the more dehydrated you are. So a successful rehydration process would be consuming more than the lost weight in fluids and pissing clear. You should be doing that the night before. And if you've succeeded in doing so the night before, you require no special or extra water or fluids day of, except under special circumstances, like environmentally speaking, okay? So you should not have to be chugging water before your first event if you've done things right. Now, this is not true if you're doing morning of weigh-ins, right? And you've like made weight. If you're a super heavyweight, you don't give a fuck, and you just roll in there at 8 and girls meeting at 9. Hopefully you're just drinking as normal, and this is just another day in the gym. Does that make sense?
Yep.
All right, so not dissing yourself. Okay, so hydration and indoor versus outdoor situations. This is a really good question, and I think there's no way that we can answer it all, but indoors is probably the best environment most of the time, save for perhaps having no AC and like being in the south in the summer, which happens. And then it's going to be 75 or 80 degrees in the dark, but that's warm.
The humidity.
Yeah, and the humidity is going to be very high. And the danger with high heat, high humidity is essentially you will sweat, but once the humidity gets over like 50% or so, you won't sweat very effectively, i.e. you will perspire, but your perspiration will not evaporate. So you will lose fluids, but you won't actually cool off. And that sucks. One remedy is to get in front of a fan. That increased circumduction of the air should help your sweat to evaporate and cool your body temperature. But if you would go unchecked with that, one, all your clothes will be drenched. That might mess with your performance, might just make you feel gross. But two, you're going to lose a lot of water, and you will have to actually keep up hydration-wise. If you're not stepping on and off the scale constantly, you won't know how much water you really lost, and then it'll be kind of played by ear, just drinking to match your estimated fluid loss. And who knows if you're doing that correctly or not, other than to, again, check your urine color or weigh you in constantly throughout the day. That's difficult to do. So that can be a very tough environment. Outdoors. Well, there's a lot of different kinds of outdoors, aren't there?
Lots of outdoors.
So, you've never done really an outdoor show.
I have not done an outdoor.
Don't count the edge. So outdoor. Outdoors could mean sitting out in the sun, which can be really difficult for athletes for a variety of reasons. Gabby tans very nicely. Some other strength athletes do not. So you could be worried about sunscreen, and that's like a whole extra thing. It doesn't really have to do with food, but it can be like greasy hands and like smelling, zinc oxide all day and just being weird. But getting burnt could again affect your performance. It can hurt to put on a truck harness where you got a fucking sunburn. So that's something to think about. But really more importantly is just like the influence of heat on how much you sweat, how dehydrated you get. The combination of high heat and low humidity and a breeze is honestly probably going to feel pretty great. It's like 80 or 90 degrees outside and it's dry and it's breezy. You're going to feel pretty comfortable. But if it's over 75, 80 degrees, you are sweating. You just may not notice it because the breeze is evaporating your sweat very rapidly. So your core temperature is not rising. If nothing else, we are limited to the next 14 minutes.
Okay. So in case it's not like you didn't make it on the camera before, Jason was talking about being an efficient sweater. Basically, you can be good at sweating. So you want to like recap that just in case?
You can be good at anything if you believe in yourself and you try hard enough. Yeah. So no, not really.
Okay. Cool. Next question was somebody asked about weigh-ins again, like whether you eat beforehand or not. In the case of something like a 2-hour weigh-in where you may need to kind of rehydrate and eat very quickly shortly after you weigh in, if you are significantly under enough to be able to eat beforehand, eat. Or if you don't have to worry about it, you're super heavyweight, you sit well under your class, then sure, go ahead and eat whatever you want. If you are trying to make weight and you are cutting it close, don't eat, don't drink anything, or risk not making weight.
No body pain, nothing. Nothing at all.
Weigh-ins can get weird. Things can get a little weird.
Maybe something like that. Yeah. I don't know what else to say about that. That seems like kind of an obvious one. If you're supposed to be 140.5 or lower, and you're not really sure if you're 141 or 142 or maybe 140, then no, you can't eat. Not until you're sure. I.e. when the weigh-in is over. Now that we're actually doing this, I'm realizing we pretty much covered everything.
Yeah. I mean, I think kind of the biggest takeaways are like test everything.
Yes.
Absolutely everything. And then have a plan. So you need to have some sort of like food and hydration plan. I know for a lot of our girls who have competed for the first time, I would have to go around and remind them to eat something. Because I noticed they had to eat before events, so to drink some water. If you're nervous, it's your first contest or something like that, maybe have like a designated person, whether it's your coach or somebody who's like helping handle you that day, just kind of remind you, be like, hey, like you should probably eat something. Because with all the nerves and talking to people and the excitement of the day, you can forget to eat, which sounds weird, but it happens.
I think also another takeaway, it would be way better to have food with you that you don't eat than the alternative, which would be like starving to death.
And people share their snacks, but you may not want their snacks.
Yeah, if it's not something you're comfortable with or you know how you're going to respond, you really don't want to start begging for food.
Yeah.
So way better to just have yourself a little insulated bag of food or something like that, a couple of things, and not need it than to wind up unhappy with what you got.
Yeah. So
all right.
Be prepared, test everything, have a plan.
No surprises that day.
None.
Everything is something you tried before.
Yes. And if you can't enjoy the food that you eat after weigh-ins before as well, you don't have to do like a mini cut or anything, but be familiar with how those foods affect you if you are really hungry, things like that.
Time is your friend.
Yes.
So if you've got day before weigh-ins and it's any time between like 6 and 8, you go at 5:59. Right?
Stand in line.
Yeah. And if it's like all day, man, go like the morning before. Like that's awesome.
Yeah.
Like give yourself 30 hours instead of 20 hours, and your recomp will be really easy.
Yes.
Pig out night before, maybe an early breakfast if it's real early and it's really comfortable for you. But most people don't like to eat a lot right before they do something really difficult. So give yourself some space.
Yeah. And eat what you normally eat before you train, whether that be a little or a lot, have the same types of foods. And if you're somebody like me who doesn't like to eat in the morning, but you kind of know you need to, I try to eat things that are a little bit more calorically dense that I can eat a small volume of because I don't want to eat a ton sitting in my stomach. So that works for me.
No French toast.
Well, I can eat French toast, but it's like oatmeal, which is significantly less exciting than French toast.
It's not very calorically dense either.
Well,
it's carbohydratedly dense.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Peanut butter. I can eat peanut butter.
And you can have peanut butter in anything, I guess.
Try hard.
And you believe in yourself. So what else?
I think we actually might have covered everything.
Yeah.
I think we actually did it.
Sweat. powdered sugar.
Mostly.
Okay, well, cool. There we go.
If you have any other specific questions, comment on YouTube or Facebook, and we will address them and answer them for you. And,
Sorry about the fire, guys. We forgot to turn it on earlier.
But it's on now.
It's on now.
So it can officially be a fireside chat.
I feel like this is like an Olympic flame thing. Like we're never gonna turn it off.
We're just gonna carry it.
But I also need to put it away, so we probably are.
Yeah.
All right.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye.